He was a stranger, until the alien princess made him her own. The air was thick with the hum of engines, the chatter of hundreds of species, and the distant glow of advertisements floating in midair. He had no memory of how he had arrived here, no identification, and no idea why he was standing in the center of this alien marketplace. Yet something in him remained calm. Humans were survivors, he reminded himself, even when they didn't remember their past. Around him, creatures of all shapes and sizes moved with practiced grace. Some had wings, some had multiple limbs, and others seemed to shimmer with light in a way that made him squint. Despite their differences, they all seemed to understand the station's rhythm, flowing together like a well-rehearsed dance. Elias, an outsider in every sense, took careful steps, observing without touching, listening without speaking too much. He caught sight of a vendor offering luminous fruits that pulsed like small suns. Hesitant, he approached. The vendor, a squat creature with 3 eyes, turned its gaze to him. "First time here, human?" it asked in a melodic tone. Elias blinked. The creature spoke galactic common, yet the accent was strange. I think so," he admitted, unsure how much honesty would help him. The vendor chuckled, a sound like wind chimes. "Humans are rare, yes, curious, clever, always curious. Watch yourself, stranger." It handed him a glowing fruit. "Try it. It will help you understand the station, maybe." Elias took it cautiously. The fruit had a strange, sweet aroma that reminded him vaguely of something from his childhood, a memory that refused to surface. He bit into it, and the taste was both alien and comforting, like a mixture of honey and starlight. Around him, the creatures of the marketplace paused briefly, observing the human who had dared to take a bite. As he walked further, Elias noticed a pattern. Small problems arose, and he instinctively solved them. A floating vendor cart tipped over, spilling its wares, and he quickly guided it upright before anyone was hurt. A confused alien child wandered into a busy walkway, and he gently steered it back to safety. Each act was small, but it drew attention. Whispers spread among the crowd, and eyes followed him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. From the upper balcony of the station, watching the crowd from a distance, Princess Leora observed him. She was young for her species, with silver-blue skin that shimmered under the station lights and eyes that reflected the cosmos themselves. She had seen many visitors, diplomats, and travelers, but few had the quiet confidence Elias carried. Something about the way he moved, alert, careful, yet unafraid, made her heart quicken, not in a romantic way, but with intrigue. She leaned closer to her aide. "Who is that human?" she asked. "Unknown, Your Highness, no records." "He just appeared on the central platform," her aide replied, bowing slightly. "Some say he solves small problems naturally, like he belongs here." Leora's eyes never left him. She had always been taught to be cautious around outsiders. But humans were something else. There was a spark in them that other species lacked, a combination of intuition and creativity that often turned the impossible into the practical. She decided she would meet him herself, and perhaps understand why he had come to her station. Meanwhile, Elias found a quiet corner near a reflective pool that captured the soft glow of the station's lights. He tried to remember why he was here. Every detail of his past felt hazy, as though someone had wiped a slate clean. Yet he did remember one thing: humans adapt. And he would adapt, even if it meant learning the customs, the languages, and the unspoken rules of hundreds of alien species, all at once. He watched as a group of tall, crystalline beings debated a mathematical problem that seemed impossible to him. Most observers shrugged, but Elias noticed a small flaw in their logic. He stepped forward hesitantly. "Excuse me," he said. "If you try this approach," he explained a simple, human-style shortcut. The beings paused. One, taller than the rest, tilted its head. Then slowly it smiled. A smile for them was a brightening of facets that reflected light like prisms. "Remarkable," it said. "You think differently. You are unusual." Elias felt a flicker of pride, even though he didn't fully understand the compliment. He was used to being underestimated, but here it seemed to matter. Every interaction made him feel more present, more grounded, and less like a stranger lost in a sea of stars. That evening the station quieted slightly, though still buzzing with activity. Leora descended from her balcony, moving with a grace that drew Elias' attention even before he knew who she was. She approached him without fanfare, her presence commanding yet calm. "Hello," she said softly, yet clearly enough to carry over the ambient noise. "I am Leora, Princess of Solari Prime, and you are," Elias straightened. Elias, he said, I'm not sure why I'm here, I just appeared. Leora's eyes sparkled as if she were amused and curious at the same time. Most who arrive in my station have a purpose, even if they do not know it themselves. Perhaps you will discover yours. Elias nodded, unsure whether to speak more. The princess didn't intimidate him. Instead, her calm authority encouraged his natural curiosity. I want to understand this place, he said. Everything here, the people, the rules, the way things work, I want to learn. Curiosity suits you, Leora said. Few outsiders take the time to observe and understand rather than just move through. Perhaps that is why you were meant to be here. For the first time since he arrived, Elias felt a small warmth in his chest, a sense of belonging, fleeting but undeniable. Leora, sensing this, smiled faintly, then gestured toward the central marketplace. Walk with me. There is much you can learn here if you have the eyes to see. As they moved together through the station, Elias noticed more details than ever before. The subtle way aliens greeted each other, the color shifts in communication patterns, and the quiet moments of kindness that often went unnoticed. He realized that while he had no memory of his arrival, he had a gift, the ability to observe and adapt, to understand the world without prior instruction. The day faded into night as the station's lights shifted to a softer glow and the hub's rhythm slowed. Yet Elias felt alive in a way he hadn't before. He was still a stranger, still uncertain of his origins or purpose, but the presence of Princess Leora and the small victories of understanding gave him hope. Maybe he thought being a stranger wasn't so bad, at least not when someone saw you for more than your name, your appearance, or your species. By the time they paused near a viewing deck that overlooked the orbiting stars, Leora spoke again. Tell me, Elias, what do you see? Elias leaned on the railing, staring at the swirling nebulae and the distant planets. I see possibility, he said. I see that there's more to this place than rules and routines. I see life and maybe even a reason why I'm here. Leora studied him, her expression thoughtful. Perhaps you are exactly the kind of human I hoped would appear, a mind unbound by expectation, willing to learn and grow. Stay with me, and you may find that even strangers can leave a mark on the universe. For the first time in a long while, Elias smiled. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he felt ready. The station was vast, the stars beyond even vaster, yet for the first time he felt that he had a place, even if it was still uncertain, among the endless possibilities of the galaxy. And in that moment, under the alien lights of Solaris Station, amidst beings of countless forms, Elias began to feel something he had never felt before, a spark of home. Elias walked beside Princess Leora as the station's lights shifted with the passing of the cycle. Solaris Station was alive with movement. Trains of glowing energy carried passengers. Vendors displayed wares that sparkled in colors unknown to the human eye, and groups of beings gathered in quiet conversations. Every detail fascinated him, and every detail taught him something new. Leora noticed the way he observed without judgment, the way he did not merely pass through the crowd but engaged with it gently, respectfully. Most humans would be overwhelmed, she said softly, but you notice everything. Elias shrugged, smiling faintly. I guess humans survive by noticing, by asking questions, by seeing what others miss. Sometimes the smallest details make the biggest difference. Leora's eyes glimmered. Then perhaps you are the kind of human our empire could learn from. Come, I want to show you something. She led him down a spiral ramp that overlooked the central hub. From there, the station stretched like a miniature galaxy, with floating gardens, water canals, and hovering platforms. This is the Observatory of Solari, she explained. Here, we map not only the stars, but also the currents of civilization. Every planet, every species, every movement is noted and studied. Elia's eyes widened. You keep track of all this? Leora smiled. Not alone, of course, but the system is vast. It collects data, predicts trends, and highlights potential opportunities or problems. Yet it lacks something important. And what's that? Elias asked. Perspective, emotion, creativity. Sometimes the most important solutions cannot be calculated, they must be understood. She paused, letting her words hang in the air. This is why I am intrigued by you. You see the world differently. Elias felt a mixture of pride and unease. He had always known humans were clever, but he had never thought of himself as remarkable. I don't know if I'm really that special, he admitted. Specialness is not always about power or status, Leora said. Sometimes it is about insight, about asking the right question when no one else does. You notice what others overlook. That is rare. They approached a large, transparent dome. Inside, the observatory was filled with holographic displays of star systems, planetary networks, and interstellar trade routes. Beings of all types worked quietly, adjusting models, exchanging data, and consulting the projected maps. Elias walked closer to one of the displays, fascinated by the intricate patterns of movement. "Here," Leora said, pointing to a cluster of systems, "there is a problem we cannot solve. Trade between these planets is collapsing because of miscommunication and cultural misunderstandings. Our calculations provide solutions, but they do not account for human or any sentient intuition." Elias studied the map. He noticed the flow of goods and ideas was interrupted by small points of friction, easily overlooked. "What if you looked at it not as a system of trade, but as a system of people?" he suggested. "Every friction point is caused by misunderstanding. If you understand what each culture values and fears, you could propose a compromise they actually want, not just what your calculations say is efficient." Leora's eyes widened. "Exactly, and that is why I am interested in your ideas. You think in ways our logic cannot always reach." For the next hours, they worked side by side, Elias suggesting approaches that blended observation, empathy, and creativity. Leora was amazed at his ability to simplify complex problems, to see the human, or sentient, element hidden in a galaxy of data. At one point, Elias noticed a group of smaller alien traders struggling to negotiate with a larger consortium. "Look at them," he said quietly. "They are worried not about resources, but about respect. If we acknowledge their culture, they will cooperate willingly." Leora watched him approach the traders, unsure what he would do. Elias spoke to them in clear, simple galactic common, showing interest in their customs, asking questions, and listening attentively. Slowly, the tension eased, and the traders began to communicate freely. The larger consortium, seeing the humans' tact, adjusted their approach. Within an hour, the negotiation ended amicably. Leora was impressed. "Humans can resolve conflict without force," she said softly, "simply by understanding." Elias smiled. "We survive by seeing connections others miss, not through strength but through observation and respect." As the cycle turned toward night, the station quieted, but Elia's mind remained alert. He had never felt so alive. For the first time, he was not simply wandering, he was contributing. Every insight, every idea, every small success made him feel useful, important, and increasingly less like a stranger. Leora led him to a small balcony overlooking the station's orbiting lights. The stars stretched beyond imagination, but here on the station, the galaxy felt close, almost tangible. "Tell me," she asked, "what do you hope to find in this place?" Elias leaned on the railing. "I don't know if I came here looking for anything," he admitted. "Maybe I just needed to understand, but now I feel like I can help, like I belong somewhere, even if I don't know why yet," Leora smiled. "Belonging is not always about memory or origin. Sometimes it is about choice. You are choosing to see, to learn, to act. That is enough." Over the next few days, Leora introduced Elias to more parts of the station. He walked through the gardens suspended in zero gravity, observed the flow of energy between planets through communication arrays, and even joined her in diplomatic meetings. Each encounter tested his human intuition and creativity, and each time he surprised the aliens with solutions that were both simple and effective. One evening, as they returned from a particularly complex diplomatic discussion, Elias asked a question he had been holding back. "Why are you showing me all of this? Why involve me?" Leora considered him thoughtfully. "Because sometimes those who are outsiders see the world more clearly than those who live inside it. You notice the gaps, the misunderstandings, the hidden paths. You can teach even an empire something new." Elias felt a thrill of pride mixed with humility. "I never thought a human like me could make a difference in such a vast galaxy," he said. "You can," Leora replied firmly. "And perhaps you already have, in ways you do not yet realize." Days turned into weeks, and Elias continued to grow in confidence and knowledge. The station no longer felt like a maze of strangers. He knew where to find the vendors who offered advice rather than goods, the quiet corners where beings reflected on data, and the paths where culture flowed like a river of ideas. He was learning not only the station, but also himself. During one evening walk, Leora brought him to a secluded area where the walls shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. "These lights tell stories," she explained. "Stories of exploration, of unity, of the challenges of different civilizations working together." Elias watched the lights dance across the walls. "They're beautiful," he said, "and they remind me that every species has a story, every person has a role. Maybe that's why I'm here, to be part of a story bigger than myself." Leora looked at him with admiration. "You see more than most. Humans have a gift. It is not strength, nor technology, nor even intelligence alone. It is insight, curiosity, and resilience. That is why I am fascinated by you." Elias felt a warmth he could not explain. He had never known a human, or any being, who valued him so simply for who he was, for what he could observe and imagine. Perhaps this was what it meant to be seen, truly seen, in a universe that often overlooked individuals. As the station's lights dimmed and the stars outside twinkled faintly, Elias and Leora stood together in silence. It was a quiet companionship, built not on words, but on shared understanding, respect, and curiosity. Then, unexpectedly, Leora spoke, her voice soft but deliberate. "There is a challenge coming, Elias, a misunderstanding between empires that could disrupt trade, communication, and trust. I think your perspective might help us prevent it." Elias straightened, feeling both nervous and excited. "I'll do my best," he said. Leora smiled, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I know you will. Humans often see solutions others cannot. Perhaps that is why the universe has brought you here." For the first time, Elias felt a sense of purpose stronger than mere survival. He was no longer just a stranger wandering an alien station. He was part of something larger, a living thread in the web of interstellar life. And with Leora's guidance, he would begin to understand just how far that thread could stretch. The night deepened, and the station hummed quietly, yet Elias' mind buzzed with ideas, plans, and possibilities. He had arrived as a stranger, but he was already learning that humans could leave marks on worlds without weapons, without power, without force, simply through thought, understanding, and care. And as he looked at Leora, standing beside him, he realized that perhaps this partnership, this unusual bond, was the start of a story that could change more than just a station. It could change the galaxy. The day began like any other on Solaris Station, with ships gliding silently through the docking bays and traders preparing their stands for the busy cycle ahead. Yet beneath the routine, a tension hummed through the air, subtle but unmistakable. Leora had received urgent messages from multiple planetary systems. Small misunderstandings had grown into bigger problems. Trade delays, miscommunications, and minor disputes threatened to create a chain reaction across several allied civilizations. Elias noticed the unease as soon as he entered the observatory with Leora. Data streams projected in soft blue light, mapping the flow of goods, messages, and personnel across dozens of star systems. Beings of different shapes and sizes moved quickly among the projections, their expressions tense. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice calm but curious. Leora gestured toward a cluster of flashing red points on the holographic map. "These systems are on the brink of disruption. Trade shipments are delayed, messages are being misunderstood, and small errors have grown into disagreements between planetary councils. My advisors suggest strict regulations or fines to force compliance. But I wonder if there is another way." Elias stepped closer, examining the map. Patterns emerged like tiny ripples in a pond. "It's not about control," he said thoughtfully. "It's about understanding. Every problem here comes from miscommunication or different priorities. You can't just impose a rule and expect cooperation. You need to see what each party values." Leora's eyes widened. "Exactly, but how do we convince them to cooperate willingly?" Elias thought for a moment. "We create solutions that make everyone feel respected. Show them that their culture, needs, and ideas matter. Then the result will come naturally, without force." Her admiration for him grew. "You see the human touch in diplomacy," she said softly. "Simple yet effective." They began working together, devising a plan to engage each system not as a problem to be solved, but as a partner to be understood. Leora introduced Elias to the Central Council, where representatives of multiple species had gathered. Aliens whispered among themselves when they noticed a human standing beside the princess. Humans rarely participated in such meetings, and their reputation was unknown beyond curiosity. Leora addressed the council. We face challenges that affect multiple systems. I propose we hear the perspective of our guest here, who has observed patterns and behaviors differently than we do. Murmurs filled the room. Elias felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on him, some skeptical, some curious, yet he did not falter. He focused on what he had learned: observation, empathy, and clarity. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady. "I am new to your systems, and I do not have the authority or history you all possess, but I have noticed something. Many disagreements happen because parties assume others think like them. They follow rules or expectations that work for their culture, but not for others. If we start by understanding each perspective, we can find solutions that everyone values, not just those that look efficient on a map." He gestured toward the holographic displays, pointing out key friction points where misunderstandings had escalated. For example, here, Planet A sends a shipment expecting confirmation through one protocol. Planet B interprets silence as refusal because their culture values direct responses. By adjusting how communication happens, simply clarifying expectations, both planets feel respected and trade continues smoothly. The council listened intently. Some representatives leaned forward, nodding, while others whispered among themselves. It was clear that Elia's approach, though simple, challenged their usual methods. Leora watched, her pride quietly swelling. "You think like a diplomat," she said softly, "but without titles or tradition. You rely on observation and human intuition." Elias shrugged. "We learn to solve problems without assuming we know the answer. Sometimes you have to ask the right questions first." Hours passed as the council discussed, debated, and adapted. Elias suggested modifications that respected cultural norms, clarified misunderstandings, and created incentives aligned with each species' values. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted from tension to collaboration. What had begun as a crisis transformed into a productive discussion, guided by insight rather than authority. Finally, one representative, a tall being with translucent skin, spoke. "Your perspective is unexpected, simple yet effective. Perhaps humans have qualities our systems overlook." Elias smiled faintly. "Thank you. I'm just trying to see clearly, to understand before suggesting solutions." By the end of the cycle, agreements were reached. Trade resumed, messages clarified, and each system left with a sense of respect and cooperation. The council marveled at how a single human could influence such complex interstellar interactions without force, coercion, or fear. Later, as they returned to the observatory, Leora placed a hand on Elia's shoulder. "You've done what many of my advisors could not. You've reminded us that understanding, curiosity, and empathy are more powerful than any rule or calculation." Elias looked at her, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I'm just using what humans have always used: observation, questioning, and respect for others, nothing more." Leora shook her head. "It is rare, even among humans, to use these traits so effectively. You've reminded us of what is possible when we listen, instead of just reacting." That night, Elias found himself wandering the quieter sections of the station. The lights reflected on the metallic surfaces, and the soft hum of energy felt like the heartbeat of the galaxy itself. He thought about what had happened, realizing that his human perspective had not only solved a crisis, but also left a lasting impression on beings far older and more advanced than him. For the first time, he understood something important. Humans were underestimated not because they lacked skill, but because their strengths were subtle, often invisible until applied in the right moment. Observation, empathy, and ingenuity were tools, perhaps more powerful than the most advanced technology in the galaxy. The next day, Leora invited Elias to walk with her through the station's cultural gardens. These gardens were suspended in zero gravity, filled with bioluminescent plants and floating streams of water that curved gracefully through the air. The station's visitors often came here to reflect and contemplate, but today, Elias and Leora had more pressing matters. "We need to prepare for the next cycle," Leora said. "Some systems are skeptical of human methods despite the success yesterday. They may resist collaboration if we cannot show clear results." Elias nodded. "Then we show them not by demanding trust, but by proving it works. Small examples, repeated and consistent. They will see the benefits themselves." Over the next hours, they visited several planetary representatives personally, demonstrating methods of communication and collaboration. Elias, calm, logical approach, and ability to listen impressed even the most stubborn delegates. He asked questions, suggested compromises, and guided discussions without forcing outcomes. Leora observed quietly, realizing that Elia's human approach was unlike anything her empire had seen before. Where her advisors relied on authority or calculations, Elia's relied on perception, understanding, and adaptability. And it worked. By the end of the day, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Representatives returned to their systems with renewed confidence and new methods of collaboration. Misunderstandings were corrected before they could escalate, and the networks of trade and communication grew stronger. That evening, Leora and Elias returned to the observatory. They stood together, overlooking the station and the glittering expanse of stars beyond. "You've done more than I imagined possible," Leora said. "Your insight has prevented what could have been a serious conflict." Elias smiled, feeling the warmth of accomplishment. "It wasn't just me. You gave me the chance to participate, to learn, and to try." "Your trust made this possible." Leora's expression softened. "Trust is important, and sometimes the universe sends the right people to the right place. Perhaps humans have been underestimated, not because they lack value, but because we fail to notice what they can do." Elias looked at her, realizing that this partnership, this unusual bond, was more than mere coincidence. He had arrived as a stranger, uncertain of his purpose, but now he was integral to the workings of an empire. He was learning not only about alien civilizations, but also about his own potential. The next cycle brought new challenges. Minor crises appeared in unexpected corners of the station, requiring quick thinking, understanding, and creativity. Elias rose to each occasion, applying what he had learned from observation and experience. Every success strengthened his confidence and solidified the respect of those around him. Leora, ever watchful, noticed how Elias' presence had changed the station's culture. Delegates were more willing to listen, conflicts were addressed with patience, and the flow of ideas increased. Human ingenuity, quiet, subtle, and empathetic, had become a force without violence, a reminder that intelligence and understanding could shape outcomes in ways strength alone never could. One evening, as they watched the stars from the balcony, Elias reflected aloud. "I never imagined a human could influence so many systems, so many beings, and yet here we are," Leora smiled. "And yet you have. Perhaps this is why you were brought here, to remind us that solutions do not always come from power or rules. Sometimes they come from a mind willing to see clearly, to understand deeply, and to act with care." Elias felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known. He had started as a stranger, uncertain of his place in the universe. Now he was a bridge, between species, between cultures, and between ideas. His presence had changed not only Solaris Station, but also the way many beings thought about humans. As night deepened, the station hummed quietly. Elias and Leora stood together, aware that challenges would continue to arise, but confident that understanding, curiosity, and insight would always find a way. The galaxy was vast and full of mysteries, yet Elias had discovered something profound. Even a single human, guided by observation and empathy, could make a difference that echoed far beyond themselves. And as he looked at Leora, standing beside him with quiet pride and trust, Elias knew that this journey, this partnership, was only beginning. The morning light of Solaris Station streamed through the translucent walls of the observatory, reflecting softly across the holographic displays. For Elias, it was another day, but unlike the first day he had arrived as a stranger, today he felt the weight and warmth of purpose. The station was no longer just a confusing web of alien cultures and flashing lights. It had become a living, breathing space where ideas flowed, problems could be solved, and humans, at least one human, had a voice. Leora stood beside him, watching him prepare for a series of meetings with planetary representatives. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. Elias nodded. "I think so. It feels natural now in a way I never expected," she smiled. "Natural, yes, you have found your place here, and today the Council wishes to acknowledge your contributions." Elias felt a rush of humility. He had never expected recognition. His efforts had been about understanding, about helping, not about glory. Yet, he realized that being appreciated for seeing clearly and acting thoughtfully was a reward unlike any he had known. The first meeting was with the representatives of the neighboring systems. They were beings of all sizes, shapes, and colors, gathered in the central hall, which shimmered with soft energy and the quiet hum of life support systems. They greeted him with cautious respect, a mixture of curiosity and admiration. It was a new experience. He was no longer a stranger, but a participant, someone whose ideas carried weight. Elias spoke calmly, addressing the small remaining challenges from previous cycles. "I have observed your methods and cultures," he said, "and I have seen how small misunderstandings can grow. If we approach each issue with curiosity, patience, and a desire to understand, we can find solutions that respect everyone's needs. Cooperation is not a rule, it is a choice, and it begins with listening." He demonstrated several practical techniques, simple adjustments to communication protocols, ways to show respect for differing cultural norms, and methods to avoid assumptions that often cause tension. The representatives listened intently, nodding and taking notes. Leora watched from the side, her pride quiet but unmistakable. One of the representatives, a tall crystalline being named Telira, leaned forward. "It is remarkable," she said. "We have long relied on calculations and regulations, but your approach, it brings understanding. You are changing how we see cooperation itself." Elias smiled faintly. "I am just sharing what humans have always done. We notice, we adapt, we listen. Sometimes that is enough to make a difference." The meeting ended with unanimous approval for the new communication protocols and collaborative methods. The representatives left with gratitude, leaving Elias and Leora in the quiet hall. "You've done it again," Leora said softly. "Humans can solve problems without authority, without force, without even technology, only understanding." Elias nodded, feeling a quiet pride. "I think humans are underestimated, not because we lack skill, but because others rarely notice how we think." Leora placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Perhaps it is time for more to notice. You have already left your mark on this station and on many others." Later, they walked together through the cultural gardens, suspended in zero gravity. Streams of glowing water curved around floating plants, and bioluminescent flowers pulsed softly in time with the station's hum. Aliens passed by, smiling or nodding at Elias in recognition. He realized that his presence had shifted not only policy, but also culture. Trust, respect, and understanding had grown in small ways across the station. "You've changed the way people think," Leora said quietly. "Even beings who have lived for centuries are adjusting their views because of a human. That is extraordinary." Elias looked at her, feeling both humble and amazed. "I don't feel extraordinary, I just pay attention and I try to care. Caring is rare in a galaxy so full of rules and protocol," she said. "Sometimes the simplest human traits, curiosity, empathy, patience, are the most powerful." Over the next cycles, Elias worked closely with Leora to expand these methods across the wider network of allied systems. He trained representatives in ways to listen actively, observe patterns, and approach conflicts with understanding rather than authority. Leora observed quietly, taking notes herself, realizing that humans possessed a unique combination of creativity and morality that often surpassed the most advanced calculations of her empire. One evening, as they rested in a quiet observation deck overlooking a cluster of distant stars, Leora spoke. "Elias, I have been thinking. Your presence here, it has changed more than the council, more than the station. You have reminded us all that intelligence is not just measured by knowledge, but by insight, empathy, and the courage to act with care." Elias felt a warmth in his chest. He had never considered that his perspective could have such an impact. "I only did what felt natural. I just noticed what others overlooked." "Not everyone notices," Leora said. "That is why humans are rare and why you are remarkable." The two walked in silence for a moment, watching as distant ships glided gracefully through space. Elias realized that he had come from nowhere, without memory, without a place. And yet, in this vast galaxy, he had found meaning, contribution, and respect. The next cycle brought a formal gathering. Delegates from multiple systems, some of whom had been skeptical or distant, arrived to recognize Elias' contributions. Leora introduced him before the assembly, her voice carrying authority and warmth. "This human Elias has shown us all that understanding, creativity, and respect can achieve what force and protocol cannot. He has guided us, taught us, and reminded us of the value of perspective. Today, we honor him, not for power, but for insight, empathy, and courage." Elias stood quietly, surprised. He had never sought recognition, yet he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The delegates applauded, some with gestures unique to their cultures, others with smiles or nods. Leora watched, her expression proud. After the gathering, Leora led Elias to the edge of the observation deck. "You are no longer a stranger, Elias," she said. "You belong here, not because of your species, not because of authority, but because of what you have contributed. You have made a difference. You are part of this galaxy in a way few humans ever will be." Elias felt a swell of gratitude. "I never thought I would find a place. I didn't even know I was looking. But now, I feel like I am exactly where I should be." Leora smiled. "And perhaps that is why the universe brought you here. To remind us that even the smallest perspective, applied with care and understanding, can change everything." Over the following days, Elias continued to work with representatives, guiding discussions, teaching methods, and refining protocols. His presence became a symbol of human ingenuity, not through power, not through technology, but through thought, observation, and empathy. He also grew closer to Leora, though their bond was built on respect and shared purpose rather than romance. Together, they represented the best of both worlds, human curiosity and intuition, combined with alien experience and wisdom. One afternoon, as they watched a transport ship leave for a distant system, Leora spoke again. "Do you realize what you have done, Elias? You have connected systems, prevented conflicts, and reminded us all of the value of understanding. Humans have always been underestimated, but now your work will be remembered." Elias smiled, feeling the quiet joy of achievement. "I never wanted recognition. I just wanted to see clearly to help where I could, but it feels good to know it matters." "You have changed more than just trade routes and communications," Leora said. "You have changed how beings think, how they approach each other, and even how they see humans. That is a legacy greater than any rule or calculation." Days turned into weeks, and the station thrived under the new methods. Delegates continued to apply the principles Elias had taught them, reducing misunderstandings, fostering cooperation, and building trust. Elias, once a stranger wandering the station, had become indispensable, a symbol of human insight and the quiet power of observation. As the sun of the nearest star rose over the station, casting a gentle glow across the observation decks, Elias reflected on his journey. He had arrived lost and unsure, with no memory and no place in the galaxy. Now he had a purpose, a role, and a partner who trusted and respected him. He had discovered the true strength of humans, not in weapons or technology, but in understanding, empathy, and ingenuity. Leora joined him, placing a hand on his arm. "Elias, you have done more than I could have imagined. You have turned strangers into allies, confusion into clarity, and doubt into cooperation. You have made this galaxy a better place." Elias looked at her, feeling a deep sense of belonging. "I only did what humans have always done, but thank you for believing in me, for giving me a chance." "You have earned it," she said, "and more than that, you have earned your place here. No longer a stranger, but a member of this galaxy, a part of its story." Together, they stood, looking out at the stars, knowing that challenges would continue to arise, but confident that understanding, patience, and insight would always find a way. The galaxy was vast, full of mysteries, yet Elias had discovered something profound. Even one human, guided by curiosity, empathy, and intelligence, could leave a mark that echoed across worlds. And as he looked at Leora, beside him with quiet pride and trust, Elias knew that this was only the beginning. He had arrived as a stranger, but he would remain as a guide, a bridge, and a symbol of what humans could achieve, not through force, but through thought, care, and the courage to see clearly. The stars stretched endlessly before them, and for the first time, Elias felt at home among them. He was a stranger, until the alien princess made him her own.